This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, episode number 203. Today, we're talking about overhelping and how being the one who always handles everything can quietly work against you. This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, where you'll learn how to build both a strong body and a strong mind by eating, moving, and thinking. I'm your host, physician, personal trainer, certified health coach, and certified life coach, Carrie Holland. Hey, how are you? What's new? What's good? So, what's good here? Well, I just returned from giving a keynote talk at the Missouri Speech Language Hearing Association's annual conference. They asked me to talk about the concept of work-life balance, which is most definitely a challenge, but I ran with it. And in a room full of almost 500 speech language pathologists, I knew that I had my work cut out for me because I was in a room full of people who care very much about their work. These were helpers. These were doers. And sometimes, as helpers and doers, we can help so much that it becomes a detriment to our own well-being. I've seen it in healthcare for sure. I've seen it in academia. I've seen it in business. We overhelp to the point that we squeeze ourselves out of our own lives. And when I say that, I want you to really think about what that might look like in your own life. Because this isn't just about a conference room full of speech language pathologists. This is something I see all the time in coaching. And honestly, it's something I have to watch in myself too. It's the tendency to jump in, to notice what needs to be done and just take care of it. It's the habit of following up, checking in, and making sure nothing slips through the cracks. And over time, because you are so good at helping, you become the person people rely on. You are the one who handles things, and you're the one who gets it done. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. These are all really good qualities, and they're the things that likely make you so good at the work you do. Being helpful, being thoughtful, being someone other people can count on. Those are all strengths, hands down. But there is a version of this that starts to slip in the wrong direction. And it's subtle at first. It doesn't really feel like a problem. In fact, it feels like you're doing what needs to be done, or that you're just a helper. And people appreciate that, which reinforces that behavior even more. But over time, what can happen is that helping stops being a choice and it starts to become your default. You step in automatically. You anticipate needs. You take on things before they are even fully yours to take on. And ultimately, you end up carrying way more than you realize. And that is what I want to talk about today. Because just because something is kind and just because it's appreciated, that doesn't mean it's always necessary. And it definitely doesn't mean it's sustainable. So today, I want to talk through the concept of overhelping, what that actually looks like, why so many of us fall into the pattern, and what it might be costing you, even if it doesn't look like a problem on the surface. I think many of you listening are going to hear yourselves somewhere in this, and I want to help you manage overhelping so that it doesn't deplete you in a way that I see it deplete so many women. So let's go. So to start, let's actually define what overhelping is, because I think this is where it can get a little fuzzy. When I'm talking about overhelping, I'm not talking about helping someone when they need it. I'm not talking about showing up for the people you care about or being supportive or doing your job well. That is generally not the issue. What I'm talking about is when helping becomes your default way of operating, like when you step in before someone even has a chance to struggle or figure it out on their own. Or when you find yourself solving problems that, if you really zoom out, aren't actually yours to solve. It can look like constantly anticipating what's needed. Meaning you may always be thinking 3 steps ahead, making sure everything is covered and tying up loose ends that maybe weren't even yours to begin with. So you find yourself checking in, managing details, keeping things moving, even when no one explicitly asked you to do it. And what can happen is that it starts to feel like you're responsible for how everything turns out. So it's not just your part, but you feel responsible for the outcome as a whole. And that's the shift, because at that point, it's not just that you're helping when it makes sense, it's that helping has become automatic. There is no space between you and the need. You just absorb and do it before you have time to think because it's become a habit. So helping becomes what you do without really deciding whether it's needed or if it's yours to handle in the first place, or if it's something someone else could manage. And it usually happens super fast. Most of the time, you're not sitting there thinking, should I take this on? Because you're already in it head first. You've already stepped in. You're already starting to figure it out, and you've already made it yours when maybe it didn't have to be. So that is what I mean by overhelping. And this is where it gets a little tricky because nothing I just described is inherently a problem. Helping is generally not considered a bad thing. So in fact, a lot of it is exactly what you've been praised for. It's what people appreciate about you. Your ability to jump in and help is what makes you good at what you do, whether that's at home, at work, or in your relationships. And because of that, you've likely earned a reputation for being dependable. People know you follow through. You notice things other people don't notice. You care enough to step in and you make sure things go well. And over time, that becomes part of how you're known. You are the one who has it together. You are the one who can handle it. You're the one people don't have to worry about. And those qualities become part of your identity. So of course, the pattern of overhelping sticks. And when that happens, it gets harder to let that go because your behavior works. It does what it's supposed to do. It helps people. So it gets reinforced. It gets praised. It gets rewarded. And the identity gets sealed in a little tighter. And that's what makes it so hard to see because overhelping doesn't show up looking messy or dysfunctional. It doesn't look like something that needs to be fixed. It just looks like you being thoughtful or generous. It looks like you doing a really good job of taking care of things and taking care of people. But there is a point where it stops feeling like a choice. And that's the part that's easy to miss. Because in the moment, what you're doing looks helpful. It feels like the right thing to do. You're just responding to what's in front of you and taking care of something or making things easier for someone else. So nothing about this will set off an alarm signal. But if you zoom out a little bit and you look at the pattern over time, that's when it starts to show. Because what happens is you step in during moments where it's not actually necessary. It's not harmful, it's not wrong, but it's not necessary. The other person could have handled it or figured it out or asked for help if they needed it. But instead, you're already there and have taken it on. And again, in isolation, that doesn't really seem like a big deal. But when that becomes your default and you find yourself overhelping across your day or across your roles or across your relationships, it all adds up. Because now you're not just helping occasionally. Now you're consistently inserting yourself into things that may not even require you. And that has a cost. It costs you time and energy and mental bandwidth. And mental bandwidth is the invisible exhaustion factor that mounts from taking on too much. So it's not just the outward doing piece, but it's the internal thinking piece, the mental load of having so much to think about in your jam-packed days, and it all adds up. And over time, overhelping starts to create this subtle expectation, both from other people and from yourself, that this is just how you do. You will handle it. You'll catch it. You'll take care of things and make sure it all works. And that is a lot for any one human to manage, but you try to do it. And that is where the sustainability piece comes in. Because just because something is kind and just because it helps in the moment, it doesn't mean that kind of helping is something that you can keep doing at that level in every area of your life without it eventually catching up to you. Overhelping becomes problematic because it eventually becomes unsustainable. You can be helpful in a moment, but you can still be overextended. I see this all the time, and that is a key distinction that often gets missed, but it's so important to look for, the overextension. So one way to make sense of all of this, and one way to see it more clearly in your own life, is to draw the distinction between helping and overhelping. Because again, the goal here is to not stop helping. That's not at all what we're doing. Instead, the goal is to start noticing how you're helping and whether it's something you're intentionally choosing or if it's something you're just doing automatically. When helping is intentional, there is usually a space, even if it's super short, between the need and your response, meaning you pause before you immediately step in. You're aware of what's needed, you're aware of your role, and most importantly, you are aware of your bandwidth before choosing to be involved. Keyword choosing. That is helping. It feels different. It feels unpressured. And it feels more even because you're considering your current reality before you jump in and take action. You're considering that you've got 10 other things to do with limited time and a sick kid or a sick pet at home, and that you have a big work deadline looming before you immediately go in and take on just one more thing. Overhelping, on the other hand, that feels different. Overhelping, when it happens, tends to be much faster. There isn't much, if any, pause. And that's because you see something and you're already in it before you've really had a chance to consider whether it needed to be something you take on in the first place. Often in overhelping, there is little to no consideration of your bandwidth, or you straight out ignore it because the response to help is automated and that's what you do. And the more you do this, the more stretched you get because overhelping can easily write you out of your own life. And another way to look at it is this: when you're helping in a more intentional way, there's still a sense that both people are part of the equation, meaning you can support someone, but you're not taking over for them. You can be involved without removing their role in the situation. It feels more balanced. With overhelping, that balance is uneven. So you're still there, but you've taken on more than your share. And often, without meaning to, you've taken something off someone's plate that they could have handled themselves. And again, that might make things smoother in the moment, and often it's appreciated. But it also means you work yourself out of the equation so that your time, your energy, and your capacity aren't really being considered before you jump in to help. And when you override yourself and help without considering your capacity, that's what turns helping into something that feels much heavier than it should. Because now you're not just supporting anymore, you're carrying. And that can get exhausting if you repeat that pattern without considering your capacity. So helping supports, overhelping takes over. So why do we do this in the first place? Well, if anything, the pattern of overhelping makes a whole lot of sense. For so many overhelpers, this did not come out of nowhere. This pattern developed over time. You've likely built an identity around being someone who is capable. You've established yourself as someone who can handle a lot, be dependable, and get it done. And when that's how you see yourself and how other people see you, it's very easy to keep stepping into that role over and over again. It's part identity and part proving yourself right. If you believe you are a helper, you will go out into the world and find the evidence to prove that true. And there is also a level of control to this. When you step in and take care of something, things go more smoothly. Things get done the way you expect and the way you want. So think of how you do things at home, like the groceries, or how you fold laundry, or how you load the dishwasher, or make your kids' lunches for school. There is a way you do it. And you know that if you do it that way, it will be done right. It's control. And then there's also the emotional side to it. Helping can be a really effective way to settle your own internal discomfort. Think about it. If something feels off or unclear or even a little bit tense, stepping in and helping gives you something to do. And I'm guessing that most of you listening are doers. You don't sit around and wait for things to happen, you make them happen. And that can be especially true when you're dealing with discomfort. Doing something, it distracts you from that, so you don't have to take the time to feel. And sometimes it's not even your own discomfort, it's someone else's. Meaning you see someone struggling or overwhelmed or not handling something the way you would, and that's uncomfortable to watch. So you step in, you smooth it over, you do it yourself. And again, that makes sense. You're getting rid of discomfort. And then for many people, an important piece of overhelping is that it's tied to being needed or valued. When you're the one that people rely on, there is a sense of purpose in that. You matter, you have a place or a role, and it feels good to feel needed until it starts taking away from you and affecting your own well-being. So when you put all of that together, the identity, the control, the way it settles discomfort, and the sense of being needed, it is not at all surprising that overhelping becomes a pattern. When overhelping has these types of functions in your life, it's very easy for it to become your default response, especially when you're someone who's used to being dependable, or if you're used to being the one who is needed, or if you're used to being the one who figures things out. So of course you step in and take it on. It becomes second nature. So now, when you understand all of that, you see how the pattern of overhelping develops and why it makes sense. It also makes it a little easier to see why it can become a problem. Because in the short term, this works. You step in, you take care of something, and things move along more smoothly. Problems get solved more quickly. There's less friction. You feel useful, productive, and maybe even a little relieved that it's been handled. So there's an immediate payoff. But when overhelping becomes your default and it's happening across multiple different parts of your life, that's where the longer term impact starts to show up. And it usually doesn't happen all at once. It's usually more subtle than that. You start to feel more tired than you should, not just physically, but mentally. like you're always tracking something, always thinking ahead, and always keeping tabs on what needs to happen next. And that takes a lot of mental energy. You might even notice some resentment creeping in, even if you don't want to admit it. And it's not necessarily towards any one person, but just a general sense of, why am I the one handling all of this? And at the same time, your own needs get pushed farther and farther down your list. And again, it's not usually dramatic. It's just a slow, quiet, but very real shift that squeezes you out of your own life because you're so busy taking care of everything and everybody. Like you skip something you were going to do for yourself. You put something off, like your workout or your yoga class or your book club. You tell yourself you'll do it some other time or you'll get to it later. And then later never really comes because there's always something else that needs your attention. And it can feel like everything is yours to deal with. And when that's the case, it doesn't take much for you to feel stretched thin because you are. So when you zoom out, the cost isn't just that you're tired. It's that you're taking care of everything and everyone at the expense of yourself. And that is when overhelping is not sustainable. All right, so if you're hearing this and thinking, okay, yes, this is me, I am an overhelper, the next question is, what do you actually do with it? How do you manage this? Because the answer here is not to swing to the other extreme and stop helping altogether. That is not realistic, and that's not who you are. The goal is not to become someone who doesn't care. The goal is to start helping in a way that's more intentional so that you can keep being a thoughtful, reliable person that you know yourself to be, but without it costing you as much as it does now. That is the idea. And that starts with creating just a little bit of space between the moment you notice a need and when you respond to it. We need to create just a little bit of room for you to decide if and how you want to engage on purpose instead of on autopilot. So the first place to start is just to pause. Nothing fancy, just to pause, like literally a few seconds. Just enough time to notice what you're about to do before you're already knee-deep in it. So that may mean in your next meeting, when there's an ask for a volunteer and there is crickets, instead of raising your hand like you might have done in the past, you let that silence continue a little longer instead of committing yourself. And that might feel really uncomfortable. And that's just one example, but you get the idea. Give yourself space to think before you jump in. Because right now, for many of you, there's no space. You see something and you immediately step in. So we're just trying to interrupt that pattern, even just a little. And from there, you can ask yourself a couple of really simple questions. So first, you can ask, was I actually asked to do this? And I put this one out here specifically because often the answer is actually no. Instead, you're anticipating, you're assuming, you're stepping in, but no one explicitly asked you for help. And that doesn't automatically mean you shouldn't help, but it's worth noticing. So another question you can ask yourself is this mine? Meaning, is this my role? Is this my responsibility? Is this actually my problem to solve? I really love that last one. And again, this isn't about being mean or being cold or about being rigid. It's just about getting a little more clear on where you end and someone else begins. And part of that means letting there be a little bit of a gap, like letting things sit for a minute, or letting someone else figure something out, or handling it differently than you would, or even letting someone struggle a little bit. And I know that can feel unsettling, especially if you're used to taking care of things and moving quickly. But that space is so important because if you're always the one filling it, no one else ever has to step in and do it, and the cycle repeats itself. And another piece of this is pulling back even just a little bit from constantly anticipating everything. So hear me out on this. Anticipating needs can feel super efficient. It can feel like you're staying ahead of things and preventing problems. A lot of women I know in helping roles are really, really good at this. But it also means you're taking on things and the associated mental load before they're even yours when you might not even have to. And over time, anticipating needs contributes to the enlarging mental load that you carry. So instead of immediately fixing or jumping in or taking something over, you can start to shift what helping looks like without running yourself into the ground physically or mentally. So that might mean asking a question to get more information before making your choice. It might mean listening and waiting while you consider. It might also mean being present, but without taking control of the situation. And admittedly, that's hard for many of you. And the last thing I'll say here to this point, and this is important, is that this will probably feel really uncomfortable. If you are used to stepping in quickly, not doing that is going to feel weird at first. You might feel guilty. Things might feel a little messier. Other people might even notice that you're not jumping in the same way you used to. So expect that. And know this, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're doing something different, right? I've said this before. I'll say it again here because it bears repeating. We often think that when things feel uncomfortable, it's a sign that something is wrong. And we often try to make that feeling go away ASAP, which means we go back to our default patterns like overhelping. But what if that discomfort you feel is not a sign that you're doing anything wrong? What if it's a sign you're just doing something different? And you remind yourself that change doesn't always feel comfortable. And what if you keep reminding yourself of that every time you jump in to overhelp? Like so much of what we talk about here, it comes back to a common denominator. Your ability to change comes back to your willingness to feel discomfort and keep going instead of using that discomfort as a reason to stop. So if you decide that you need to address your overhelping and you start doing things differently, remember that the discomfort you feel doesn't mean anything is going wrong. It means you're changing it up around here. And as you start to experiment with this, and as you start to notice where you're pausing, and maybe you're choosing differently than you would have before, I want to zoom out for a second. Because this isn't just about changing a behavior, it's really about how you see yourself. For many of you, being helpful is part of your identity. It's part of what you value about yourself. It's how you show up in the world. It's part of what makes you good at what you do, and part of what makes you someone other people trust and rely on. And none of that has to go away or change. You don't have to stop being someone who cares. You aren't suddenly becoming cold. You don't have to stop being thoughtful or reliable or supportive because that's not the goal. But you may need to shift what your version of caring looks like, because caring does not automatically mean that you take on everything. And being helpful doesn't mean that you have to do everything. There is a version of helping where you still show up, you still care, you're still engaged, but you're not automatically absorbing everything that comes your way. You are still leaving room for yourself. So instead, you're making intentional decisions about where your energy goes. You're allowing other people to have a role, and you're staying in the equation too. That is a very different way of operating. It's more purposeful, it's more empowered, and it's more sustainable. And honestly, it's more balanced for you and everyone else involved. So if you take anything away from this, it's not that you need to stop helping. It's that you may need to start choosing when and how you help instead of offering it automatically. And if you really think about this, this isn't just about helping. It's about how you relate to responsibility. It's about how fast you step in, how much you take on, and how you often assume something is yours to manage without really deciding if it is. And for a lot of you, and for so many of the women I work with, overhelping is just another version of something you've probably seen before. It's doing more when something feels off. It's stepping in to manage, fix, or smooth things over because that's what you're used to doing. But more isn't always the answer. Sometimes the work is in doing a little less, like pausing or letting something sit, or deciding deliberately what is yours to manage. Because yes, helping is certainly nice, but showing up in a way that's sustainable for you and for everyone else around you, that is the goal. All right, and if you want help with this, let's go. When you coach with me, we pull apart your patterns that are keeping you stuck, like overhelping, and work on showing up differently so it's more intentional, more sustainable, and actually works for your life. Check out my website, send me a message at www.carriehollandmd.com/contact, and let's talk about how coaching can help you. Thank you again for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you again next week. Hey, if you want to build muscle but don't know where to start, I've got you covered. Head over to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and download my free guide to help you maximize your strength training. Inside, you'll find the essential exercises for building muscle, plus simple 1, 2, and 3-day workout plans that you can follow with just dumbbells and a bench. You'll also find strength training tips to help you train smarter and see real results. My goal is to help you get strong, and this strength training guide will help you do it. Go to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and check it out. Thank you for listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast. If you want to learn more about how to build both a strong mind and a strong body by eating, moving, and most importantly, thinking, check out carriehollandmd.com.